Hi everyone. So I see that Curtis has made a response video, rather two response videos to my recent video, my video of earlier this evening, where I was talking about the relationship between Myers-Briggs and Socionics. Now Curtis has some criticisms to make about that video, and I would say that I don't think that Curtis is wrong. I think Curtis is right. I, at the same time, would not say that his criticisms affect or take down the point which I was making in the video, which is that, yeah, Myers-Briggs and Socionics, both um, theories each composed of different schools, different interpretations. Nevertheless, Myers-Briggs, even in its Steelman form, even if you take the strongest schools in Myers-Briggs, whether that's, say, Linda Barron's or John Beebe's model, or just regular Myers-Briggs, or if you go to, say, Keirsey's approach, that if you take the best of what they have to offer, they're still not nearly as good as the best that Socionics has to offer. In that respect, the point still stands. The underlying principle which I set out, which is that because it's all Jungian typology, they're all trying to articulate an understanding of Jungian type, you still need to pick the best one. And yes, Socionics is not a monolith. That's something which I've actually been arguing on Wikipedia recently, actually, because I feel that that has treated Socionics as a monolith. I've never made it a secret that there are other schools. I've even introduced other schools, other opinions from Socionics on my channel, talking to Timur Protsky as an example, giving my own critiques of some of Galenko's work. So yeah, it's not secret. It's common knowledge. At least it should be common knowledge of people who have been watching all my videos. But the key thing is that if you pick the best school out of Socionics, you compare it to the best school out of Myers-Briggs, the best account, the Socionics school wins. And because it wins, that should be the most up-to-date patch, as it were, the most up-to-date account of Jungian type. So that's the point I was making. But in regards to the general point, or is it a criticism or a warning, a caveat from Curtis about what we call what I do? Is it Socionics? Is it World Socionic Society Socionics? I think by the end of the day, yes, there are different ways of approaching Socionics. I also think that my view is legitimate. This is where I think Curtis is, I think, false. I think is incorrect. I think it's false to say that there is no standard on what good socionics is versus bad socionics. I think there is a standard. I think there is a clear canon, which is classical socionics. I didn't come up with a term that existed before I came on the scene. And classical socionics is socionics oriented around Model A. Model A, that is Model Augustina Viziotti. Yes, that is Model Outra. That is the model of the originator of Socionics. Now, that's not to say that everything that Outra said was 100% correct, but it is to say that if you want your model to be within canon, you need to be using Model A as the central focus. And the other things you talk about in Socionics need to be derived from that. Now, of course, there's going to be some wiggle room in that. I think I definitely fall strongly within the wiggle room. So, an example, I'm someone who has tried to articulate and work with better terms to describe some of the dichotomies making up Model A. An example being, a good example being, I've been recently reflecting on mental versus vital. What does that mean? Is it about consciousness and unconsciousness? How do we see consciousness and unconsciousness? How do we measure that? How do we even define that? it's always been a very vague subject, and people have been getting some strange ideas around it. Eventually, I realised, no, it makes no sense that something is unconscious, that the demonstrated function is less conscious than the vulnerable function. How do we see that play out? But the dichotomy still exists. It must exist, mathematically speaking. So there must be a better definition for this particular point. So what definition can I come up with which fits in with everything else that makes sense from all the other dichotomies in their different positions? That basically it's about the philosophy behind where and when you can make some changes. The changes should be minimal, and they should be about articulating model A in the way which is as clear and consistent and aligns with the reality we can observe as much as possible. And that's what I've been trying to do. That's where I make some changes. With regards to rational and irrational, it's not quite right to say that I disregard it. I don't. I do regard rational versus irrational. What I have reservations on is describing things in terms of schizotimes and cyclotimes and actually picking out some sort of big behavioral difference. And the reason why I am wary of that is because it doesn't make sense in terms of what accepting producing as a function dichotomy means alongside rational and irrational as an information dichotomy. The point is, I'm working within Ausch's model. Where I can disagree is where I've taken what Ausher has said and I'm thinking actually it's not quite internally coherent. Why would this thing be describing some sort of tendency to cycle between tasks or focus on one task and all the rest? Why would it show this sort of very clearly behavioral trait when it's dealing with a kind of information taking priority or precedence over another kind of information? So it's where Ausher has not been coherent in her own writings and descriptions, where I can step in and say, actually, I think if we move this slightly here, we tweak this definition here, then the model actually works better. So that's what I am doing. I'm trying to curate and repair what has been put in front of me, making it and developing it to be as good as it can possibly be. What I'm not doing is reinventing the wheel. Now, where I think schools of socionics cease to be classical, a very clear example is with Galenko, because he's invented Model G. That is a completely different model. It's structured completely differently. It's not describing information metabolism, supposedly. It's describing something called energy metabolism, although what exactly that is still remains to this day to be very, very vague. I've criticized that before. There are other models which look to be oriented around Model A. Like Timos Brodsky's approach, but in reality have sort of hollowed out all the meaning of Model A and sort of exported that to Psycho Yoga. So we can't really do the same thing that we use in Socionics, in World Socionic Society's approach. But you can't do the things we do here with Timos Brodsky's approach, because he's left only the semantics and exported all the behavioral stuff to Psycho Yoga, which makes it confusing. It's sort of like chopping off the head, keeping the head and throwing the legs and the arms out somewhere else. So it's not a working model on its own anymore. So is that still classical school? I don't know. I just think it's sort of a bit of a broken school, really, and sort of pieced it with an extra theory. Just use Occam's razor and get rid of Psycho Yoga and just keep Socionics and actually put the meaning there where it's meant to be. But, the point is there are different schools. I haven't pretended that there aren't. When I call my approach Socionics, as opposed to just the World Socionic Society approach to Socionics, is because, one, I think that my school is, well, I say it's a school, it's just me talking on the group. I guess it's a school, people learn from it, I guess. But the point is, I think my approach is the best approach I've seen. I've tried. I've talked to various Russian and Ukrainian socionists. A lot of them have greatly disappointed in terms of some of their understandings, where they're not. Now, there's a big exception to that, which is a school of system socionics, which is Model A. It's classical as well. There are other schools other than my own which are classical socionics, and that's quite clear. But there are other schools which do weird things where they stop looking at the Model A and instead trying to work out the type using visual identification, or they're using colour preferences like the associative school of typology by Olga Tangerman. And yeah, I think especially if you're relying entirely on visual identification, you're not even looking at what the personality is anymore, how the information metabolizes in terms of motivations and values and strengths. If you're no longer looking at that, it's no longer really socionics. Just calling it socionics is really a typology of facial spasms, you could say. But yeah, so yeah, it is of course a more complicated matter, and I'm presenting videos in a way which is simplified for the sake of understanding, and I'm doing it with the intentions of presenting the best of what we have. Because at the end of the day, it fits into what I was saying before. You get the steel man of each particular school, each particular approach, and you pit them against one another. So there's no point presenting the straw man as socionics when you can present the steel man as socionics. And I believe I do have the steel man as socionics. I'm happy to debate with other socionists if they feel they have a better understanding of socialism, which has greater explanatory power. That's fine. But it still doesn't go against my point, which is that if you take socionics versus MBTI, socionics wins. So yeah, that's the point. We can add in greater nuance, but it doesn't change the underlying point which I was trying to make in the video. But yeah, I hope that clears things up.